everybody. It's Thursday. Welcome to Broker Talk. We are a weekly show that delivers the unvarnished truth about real estate and the real estate industry. Each week, we bring you guests who are experts in their fields, and they'll break down the facts for you and deliver solutions for you. I'm joined this week and every week by my able co-host Jim Lowenstern of the broker owner of Castleson Limited International. Hey Jim, what's doing with you today?
Same old, same old. It's been a busy time in the market, and we got a beautiful day in Boston.
It is a beautiful day. It's warm for Boston. It's in the 40s. Our guest today is Marc. He is a civil litigator with a focus in real estate. He's been called all kinds of things. He's an attorney, but mostly it's been the cleaner, the fixer, and a surgeon because he surgically finds the truth and helps his clients. Welcome aboard, Marc.
Thank you so much for having me, Larry. It's great to be here.
And as Jim says, it's wonderful to be had, or not. Anyway, Jim, do you like our new music?
Yeah, I do. It's a welcome change. More to come. And if anybody's out there, they have unrecorded music, unlicensed, whatever, you'll give us a license to put 15, 20 seconds of. Actually, do we know who did that little intro today?
You sent it to me. I have no clue.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I can look it up.
We'll find out.
I'll figure it out someday.
Well, we'll find out soon enough when I post. This is going to be posted right away on. Well, it is being posted right away.
I will almost guarantee you that band is not together anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, more importantly, back to our guest. Marc is someone who works both in the real estate industry as well as a variety of other areas. We're focused on the real estate. I had a wonderful conversation with Marc earlier today about some of the most common lawsuits that he sees. We know from our recent guest, the former president of Mass Association of Realtors, that there are a variety of ways that you can mediate, litigate issues within the organization, but when it can't be done there, you need an able attorney. So, Marc, let me ask you, what are some of the most common issues that you litigate related to real estate?
Well, sure, Larry. Thanks again for having me. Great to see you, Jim. There are so many different kinds of real estate cases that I personally deal with. Every case is very different. Every case is very factually independent, and people should seek their own advice from counsel as to those cases. The three main categories that I would say that I would deal with include purchase and sale disputes arising from the sale of land. And then related to that are the torts and other statutory claims that come with that could arise from either misrepresentation claims, what some people would call fraud, whether it's intentional, negligent misrepresentations, as well as what we refer to as unfair and deceptive trade practices or acts under Chapter 93A. Those often infect themselves into these real estate cases. And then,
and we should say, Marc, 93A, that's just pertains to Massachusetts statute, correct?
That is correct. That's Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 93. That is a Massachusetts statute. I'm aware that many other states have their own similar versions of that.
And countries. We're international. We've actually had people from other countries on the show.
So let's break that down just a little bit.
Sure.
93A relates to the truthful advertising and marketing and what you say. And for instance, real estate, you can use puffery. You can say the falling down house is a fixer-upper. That is not a 93A dispute. And why is that, Mark?
Well, whether it is or it isn't would depend, understand, first of all and foremost, on all the facts and circumstances that should be analyzed. That should be understood right away. Each case is very different. But 93A itself prohibits unfair or deceptive practices or acts in trade or commerce. And though each one of those words is incredibly loaded legally as to what it means. Sometimes the statute may not apply depending on the context. If it does apply, the question is which sections might apply, because it governs multiple kinds of claims. If it is a consumer claim, you would have to look to one section of the statute, or the Section 9 issues. If it is a business claim, you're in the Section 11 area, as we call it, which is generally higher standards of liability if it's a commercial dispute.
Could you give us some examples?
Sure. So, for example, in the case of the sale of residential real estate, a common issue that comes up is if the buyer believes that they were misrepresented to by either the seller or the seller's agent, i.e. the broker or salesperson, or both, or potentially even others may be involved. Home inspections potentially get involved. Every case is different. And so that an example would be if for a 93A violation, what is a 93A? Is that, if that's what you're driving at? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, good example.
That's an example. Is there's 1,000 ways to get to 93A in the universe potentially, but each one of those needs to be checked carefully. For example, a misrepresentation, a fraud, an intentional misrepresentation is a gateway to potentially get to 93A liability, but the statute stands on its own. However, the courts have interpreted what those words mean, unfair or deceptive practice, which are all separate issues, that is what it would mean. But there are many ways to get there.
I was talking to
I'm wondering, Mark, sorry, Larry, can I just squeeze a question in?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering, we've had a very healthy real estate market for several years, maybe close to a decade now. Do you find fewer lawsuits because the prices are going up and people are just happy they got the house at any price, or is it even more lawsuits now because the prices are higher and people are more sensitive to what they've spent? I'm kind of curious how the economy and the real estate market plays into your business.
Well, since my practice is not so much hinged, for example, on the development and the volume per se of purchase and sales. In fact, the more transactions there are, the more chance there may be for dispute. I have certainly not seen any downplay in the number of real estate disputes. Sometimes the types of them may vary. But no, I don't see that happening. I do think that there may be more economic incentive out there, but those are good statistical questions that I'd love to know the answers to.
Well, you mentioned that every case is different, and it is absolutely true. Every client is different. Every house is different. Everything changes. So then we begin to share anecdotal information. You and I had a conversation earlier today about a situation that I had where I was told that a property that I was listing and sold was mixed use. It was commercial and residential. I was told by the owner and some of the neighbors that that it was both commercial and residential. The town called it commercial and residential. So I went ahead and promoted it as such. I had someone come in who wanted to put his business, an attorney, wanted to put his business in the commercial part. There was a separation within the house where and I was I was concerned about that. So I went to the town and asked, I see this is commercial and residential. Could you give me more information? And they told me that it really wasn't commercial. It was grandfathered in because of a set of circumstances. Um, I was concerned about that and went back to my buyer and explained that it's not likely he's going to be able to put his law office in that space. It broke the deal down. If I hadn't done that, would I have been liable for misrepresenting?
Well, again, that's an excellent question because that would still be dependent upon all the facts and circumstances. What I can say is that the disputes in Massachusetts in particular concerning the use representations have been readily apparent. They've come up through the courts, and the courts have made decisions about them. It is important to understand that in a broker's position, a broker has generally the obligation to disclose all material facts that they know or may reasonably know. What that is in every case may depend. So your choice in that case, Larry, to disclose was likely the better part, the better choice. But because had that buyer, that clearly influenced the buyer's choice to whether to purchase, correct? Because they backed out. And
yeah.
So yes, that is a potential issue. And the only thing I can say on any given fact pattern, since these are all potentially hypotheticals, is that each should be analyzed to determine the scope of liability if it's an issue, and as soon as possible. That's all that should be said. But certainly an excellent question for any broker in a similar situation where the use of the property may be an issue.
What's the most unusual case you've ever litigated, and were you the defense attorney, or did you handle it for the plaintiff?
That's a great question. The most unusual case I think I ever handled was the case of the attempted theft of property, where someone had forged a deed, signed my client's property themselves, and attempted to sell it. They were caught literally running out of the closing on that moment. But that was one of the most unusual matters I'd ever been involved in.
So somebody, what was it, a vacant property? How did it get so far down the line? It sounds like it had to be shown and financed, maybe an appraisal. How did it get so far down the road?
These types of matters, the only thing I can say is the basic type of thing was and where, what the nature of the action was. But I can say in those types of actions, that raises a critical point that people should look at when they're dealing with any real estate dispute, which is what sort of equitable relief you may need to secure your rights.
And I want to talk about what the real estate agents should be doing in these cases. Is they should be.
Yeah, was there a real estate agent?
The answer is I can't discuss those particular facts of the case. Just the nature that was the nature of the strangest nature of the case, which was the question. But
you can't let us know if it was with the realtors or licensed brokers or for sale by owner.
That I can't get
Well, it
into.
wouldn't have been for sale by owner, of course. It was for sale by not owner.
No, that I cannot, certainly not. I won't get into that, but I would say that in any similar case where a fraudulent transaction is suspected, the people involved should certainly consult counsel right away.
It was a FISBNO.
So I think what we want to, because we like to share the best practices here, if you are a listing agent and you get a listing, you should look at the property on the MLS. You should look at the property records. If you have any questions, you should talk to the town. You should know what's going on with that property. Another anecdotal case: I have a property in a town that the surveys conflict from one town to another, and so there is a slice that if one party in there loses that slice, then they are no longer a conforming lot, and that changes the value of the property. My property has that extra slice, and so a new survey has to be done to sell that property. These are extra costs, but I know this and I can communicate that to people, and that's what listing agents should do. I mean, Jim, you have been around so long, you've seen so many of these issues get solved. How do you solve them? What do you do?
Well, that sounds like a very interesting issue you have, and I got to say, I've luckily not had that one. I've had multifamily houses that are not legally multifamilies, with brokers representing them as multifamilies. I've had um, totally redone houses where no permits were pulled. That's always fun. That
Yeah,
comes up a lot.
you can kind of tell that right away. If it's really horrible work, probably no permits.
No, no, no. That's all. It's all quality work. But brokers, when they walk into houses, I think it's a really good question for them to ask, and they probably never do. Have you pulled all the permits on all the work in this house? Because there are people that will march themselves down to City Hall because they are informed. I've happened to had sales with fathers and sons that are both real estate attorneys, and yeah, no.
I think the whole idea of multifamilies and what's a multifamily and is kind of an interesting subject to talk about, because what constitutes a multifamily, Mark?
Well, what constitutes a multifamily? Uh, that is a question under specific local zoning.
Okay.
Understand that every municipality has a very unique zoning code or bylaws, as they're usually referred to. And Boston is different than the rest of the state with respect to the laws that apply going into litigation to courts. What but there are issues. So what constitutes that can actually be a debatable, litigatable issue. That's usually done. I don't handle usually those permitting things, but I do handle any misrepresentation issues that may arise from those. So take, for example, the situation where if the seller knows and explains to the broker that a property is a two-family and is marketed as a three-family and sold as a three-family, when the broker knew that, that could certainly create an issue, potentially. And there is certainly cases about that. So those issues do come up, and you have to be exceptionally careful.
Yeah.
And seek counsel if there's any doubt as to what should be done.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for that answer. We've got to take a quick break here, and when we come back, I want to talk about how, if you have hired a contractor to do some work, what are the ways in which to hold those people to that? But for the moment, we're going to pay some of our bills. Here we go.
When you are searching for a new home, you want to be working with a realtor with years of experience, a professional with intimate knowledge of the communities that you are considering moving to, and someone who really wants to represent you as a buyer in what is probably the largest investment you will ever make in your lifetime. The realtors at Castles Unlimited want to be your choice when you are ready to make your next move. Please visit us at castlesunlimited.com or call us anytime at 800-967-3561. The realtors at Castles Unlimited are here to help your next purchase, lease, or sale.
We're back, folks. We've got Marc here with us, and he's going to help us understand when you have been had some foul play with one of your contractors. Tell me, Marc, how do you protect yourself as a consumer hiring a contractor? What are some of the best practices in that?
Well, that is an area that I do touch. And that when you're first hiring a contractor, it's important that you should check their license and registration, or if they are a home improvement contractor, and this is for residents. There's a whole separate box if it's commercial as well. But for home improvement contractors that work for residential home improvement contracting, Massachusetts has very specific laws and a separate board that addresses that, and the exact acronym of which I can't recall. But there's a guarantee fund also. There's dispute resolution through that board if there are any issues. But if there are problems, understand their contracts should have to comply with the law. Their performance needs to comply with the law, and understand as a very general matter, very general, that one issue that should be analyzed in any of those matters is whether the violation of any laws meant to protect the consumer have been violated. And certainly some of those laws were concerning home improvement contractors. That is a gateway to 93A as well. But what's important is to understand what are the appropriate practices. I don't opine on that in any sense here, but those are questions that should be asked when hiring. I usually am not involved, of course, at that point, because I'm not your general practitioner that you come to get consultation with respect to your contract. It's usually after the fact when the dispute is either arisen or about to arise.
Go ahead, Jim.
Marc, are there any standards for contractors? 60 days, 90 days, a year guarantee? I mean, someone gets some work done on an existing rubber roof, and then less than a year later, it literally blows off the house. Are they protected? They spent $2,000 to get it repaired, and because of negligence in the work, they had to spend $15,000 to replace the whole roof.
Well, I mean, if there's a lot of potential issues in that one sentence. There's a lot of questions that, in other words, that could be asked, and certainly one of them relates to warranties. When there's also construction that involves certain materials, there's also warranty issues. If in fact those things are related to the contractor's fault, then certainly to go to the contract. And yes, there certainly are remedies, whether they are private remedies or potentially public. But every case is very different. That situation, I've had cases involving roof problems, wall problems, water penetration, all sorts of issues in all sorts of contexts. And in every one, there are specific things that may apply and specific things that don't. So it's important to be careful and not basket in everything. Is what I'm trying to say. But there are certainly rights. There are always rights. The question is, how far may they go? You don't know.
Right. With contractors, what I have seen in my past is that they may get a judgment against them, and they'll just close that business and open up tomorrow with another name. and yet it's still the same business. How do you deal with that? How do you get the new business to pay the fines from the old business if it's still the same people?
Well, that's interesting. That's what I call the phoenix problem. When the phoenix rises from the ashes, and where does that leave the plaintiff, who's been left in the dark with
Yeah.
when they have even a judgment, perhaps? Well, there is a few different issues that are raised in those contexts. Sometimes the answer might be a brick wall, depending, but the a few issues need to be looked at in those contexts. The first is often in commercial; these are commercial issues as well as real estate issues. Piercing the corporate veil: is the person individually responsible? And if not, was there a fraudulent conveyance of any kind? These are questions that should be asked, because there's actually a fraudulent transfer statute in Massachusetts that's specific.
Right. You can't. You're not allowed to start up a new corporation to avoid litigation with a other corporation.
That's a broad question. I mean, it depends.
It wasn't even a question. It's a statement. You're not allowed to do that.
The question that may be good common sense, but certainly people can start companies. The question is, can they avoid their debts doing that?
Exactly.
And that would be, a very. I've certainly had cases in that. In many times in some of my real estate cases, they in the past one of the types of matters I handle are real estate cases that are mixed with business litigation, partnership disputes, business disputes, disputes among LLC owners or joint venturers, or those sorts of matters come up in these cases. And how does the real estate get involved in that sometimes, if it's involved in development or construction? All right. So sure, those create major problems. And I've dealt with those a few times. I strongly suggest that people seek their own private counsel for those. They're very fact intensive.
On this show, we constantly are looking for absolute best practices. And in this show, Mark, you have shown that you're not going to jump to a conclusion unless you know all the factors. Whereas we agents often jump to a conclusion like, oh, this is wrong. We're going to fix this. We're going to get something. But when you have a legal issue, you should talk to legal people. When you want to get something done in real estate, well, you should talk to the professional.
That's correct. It's very important that people stay in their wheelhouses, as a general view in the real estate industry, and know how to drive their business. Because I can't advise anyone as to a particular case until they are my client. Nothing can, I can give some views generally on how things go, but they can't, and comment on the law, but I can't discuss that. But if I have a broker question, I go to a broker. What are the best practices in the brokerage industry? That would be for a Larry Lawfer or a Jim Lowenstern. Those are the questions you ask your broker. Should a permit issue, and what kind of permits are necessary for a project? That may require many different things, including attorneys, developers, going to the town, getting, those sorts of things. There could be many experts involved, particularly, of course, in construction, which is a unique field. And for more complex construction things, that definitely takes time. No, stick there, Larry. That's what I say.
So, Mark, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Well, the best way is to check my contact information would be to check my website at marcrielaw.com, MarcRielaw.com, Mark with a C. And please reach out to my firm. I'm the principal of the law office of Marc Ree PC. And that's how anyone that would be interested in consulting with me could potentially reach me. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with both of you and your audience today.
Mark, we could have talked for 2 hours. We had half an hour. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time. to talk to us. And thanks for
Thank you,
joining
Mark.
us.
Thank you, Mark.
Cool.
Join us next week.